Hey sailors, I'm Captain Steve on Some Tuesday. We are currently in the middle of the Pacific Ocean at about 117 west, 5 south. We just crossed the equator 2 days ago. We're on the way to Nuku Hiva. This little video is about Starlink. Even if you're not a sailor, it may be useful to you, but certainly if you're going to put Starlink on a boat, and especially if you're going blue water cruising, take advantage of everything I've learned in the last 20 hours of hell dealing with Starlink problems, talking to Starlink support, chatting back and forth with their AI chatbot, all the various ways to try to figure out all the problems. I was having massive problems where it would reboot multiple times per day, it would take hours to come back online, all just a nightmare, and it's all solved. So I want to give you the ability to figure that out without spending your own 20 hours doing it. So everything you want to know about Starlink. Number one, buy the Gen3 Standard dish. It's $350. The old Gen 2 that was with the motors that was actuated, they're obsolete now. Don't use one of those. They're notorious for having problems on boats. For $350, buy the new dish and be done with it. The Gen 3 dish will tell you that it's out of alignment, that it needs to be, the alignment or the tilt needs to be adjusted. I'm telling you, you can just ignore that. Get yourself a good Starlink mount, point it flat and straight at the sky, and forget about it. Ignore all the warnings the app will give you about changing the alignment. It just doesn't matter. I'm out here and we're getting 150 megabits down with exactly that method. So it works great. Finally, my opinion, I don't see any reason why you would ever buy one of the marine high performance dishes. Sure, maybe it's marinized better, it's better protected against the corrosion. All right, maybe you get better performance, but I'm getting 150 megabits, sometimes more with the standard dish. And I can buy 5 or almost 6 standard dishes for the cost of one marine high performance. So I'm not a mathematician, but I think the math doesn't math. So quick summary there. Buy the Gen 3, not the Gen 2, not the Marine. Mount it flat, ignore the warnings, you're in business. So that's hardware. Number 2 is the data plan. You have several different options to choose from. I believe the best one to go with, hands down, is the Roam Unlimited plan. If you get the regular Roam plan, which I think is $50, ocean mode is not an option. If you get Roam Unlimited in the United States, it's $165 a month, and ocean mode will cost you $2 per gig when you turn that on. You can turn it on and off as often as you want. We are using it every single day, and we actually leave it on 24 hours a day here on our passage across the Pacific. That's going to be very expensive, but we've just decided that it's worth it to us. We're also live streaming our passage on YouTube every single day with multiple cameras, which is kind of cool, so feel free to check that out. Sailing Some Tuesday, like and subscribe. But anywho, a very, very important thing with ocean mode, when you turn it on, it's going to take about 15 minutes to activate. You will continue to get unlimited data until you're more than 12 miles away from land. Right? So anytime you're near land, and islands count. I've found myself next to very small islands, and the 12-mile limit comes back on, and I'll get unlimited data. It's great. But Starlink knows as soon as you're outside of 12 miles, they will shut you down, and you will get no more data until you turn ocean mode on. Now, in what I think is kind of unfair on Starlink's part, when you come back inside that 12-mile limit, close enough to land, it will not turn off automatically. So you need to remember that. I made that mistake one time. It cost me $500 of ocean mode data when I was tied to a dock in El Salvador. You got to be careful about that. I talked to a friend just this morning that almost $2,000 that mistake cost him, another Ocean Posse member. That was Blue Safari, I think. So you got to be careful. What I do now is, if I'm coastal, I just set an alarm. When I think I'm going to be back on land, have the alarm pop on and remind me to turn ocean mode off. Obviously, it's harder on a long passage like this, but you got to remember when you get back to land, because they do not care. They will sell you that data, and they will not refund it. So make sure you get that right. The global priority plan is an option. It's another one of those things where I think the math doesn't work. That global priority is going to cost you $250 to $700 and up. And they say it gives you priority data on the ocean. If I'm getting non-priority data, it's fine. I don't see where the math works on that one. And especially with ocean mode, if you can turn it on and off anytime you want. Some people just turn it on for an hour, pull down all the data they want, and shut it back off. If you're going to leave it on like we do, make sure you go around to all of your different devices, because all of them now store stuff in the cloud, download apps in the background. If you got Dropbox running, it'll be syncing files. If you got iPhoto or any other photo app, it might be syncing to the cloud. So you could be pumping a lot of data up and down to the cloud at $2 a gigabyte, and that'll cost you dearly. So make sure you check all your devices and shut that stuff down. Very, very expensive. Sadly, Apple does not make it easy to pause syncing of iPhoto and things such as that. That's a whole different topic. I won't go into that, but you want to make sure you find a way to make that stop. Otherwise, you'll suck down a lot of data. Redundancy. Buy a second dish and bring it on board. We brought along with us a Starlink Mini, in addition to my Gen 3 Standard that's mounted on the boat permanently. That has been a lifesaver. When we run into problems with the primary dish, I pull this sucker off the shelf, plug it in, throw it up top on the cabin top on the sunbed, and 10 minutes later we've got internet again. There's some important considerations, but that gives us internet while I'm futzing around with the primary dish trying to figure out what the heck is wrong with it. And sometimes you need that internet access to contact Starlink support and ask them what the heck's wrong. So they actually helped me activate it at sea, which is one of my pieces of advice. If you're going to buy that redundant dish, activate it before you leave land, because once you're on the ocean, it's much, much harder to activate. And it's doable, but I needed help to get it done. So bring that along with you. Now, what a lot of people don't seem to know, this is big. On these residential plans, like Global Priority, you're allowed to have 2 Starlink units on the same, what they call a service line. So it's important to understand what a service line is, right? So my boat is classified as a service line. My house is a different service line that has a Starlink on it. You can put a second device on the same service line and it doesn't cost any extra, up to 2. So you can have that redundant device, no extra charge, no extra fee. It's using the same ocean mode data that it's pulling down, and it's great. There's a very important consideration. When you activate it as a standalone device on the same service line as your primary dish. What Starlink is going to want to do, what the app will try to do, is to activate it as a mesh node, which will just extend the coverage area on your boat, which might be nice. But the downside to that is, if it does that, when the primary dish goes down, the mesh node will not work anymore. So you want to activate it as a standalone device. So my standard dish, the Wi-Fi's name is Some Tuesday, coming from the primary. The Mini is called Some Tuesday Mini, and they're totally separate. And as far as I know, I can also take that with me on land and other places and use it in other places. I haven't tested that yet, so don't know, because part of the rules are it has to be on the same vessel. So if I can take it off the vessel to other places, I don't know if that's going to break the rules or not. But the important thing is you have redundancy. Now, it's just been a lifesaver for us, so I can't overemphasize that. Matter of fact, I'm so all about the redundancy, we actually have 3 Starlinks on board. I have a second Gen 3 Standard dish in a box downstairs, which I have not activated, but what I do is I pull it out of that box every couple of months, plug it in, turn it on, go to the Starlink app, and you can actually update the firmware on it. So I'm not paying for it. It's not activated, but if everything else, you know, if you know what hits the fan, I got a new dish that I can go activate relatively easily, and it's not costing me anything. It cost me $350 to buy it. That was well worth it to me. But the important part about plugging it in every couple of months and updating the software is, my understanding is, if it gets too far down the road and has never updated the software, it can get to the point where it's too far gone and will not be able to update with the newest stuff. So you got to keep it updated, but you don't have to activate it. And by the way, if you buy it at Best Buy or something, the side of the box will say it's required to activate within 7 days. That is horse hockey and not true at all. So you can safely ignore that. Set your dish up, update the software every once in a while, keep it down in storage, and it's there should you need it. That gives us a lot of peace of mind. Activation can be goofy. This is why I recommend you doing it on land. I've now activated 5 different Starlinks in 3 different locations. Never once has the activation process gone smoothly like Elon promises. You know, in theory, you're supposed to just plug it in, open the app, and boom, you're done. Every single time I've had something go wrong. I was even on the phone one time with Starlink support, and they could not explain to me what the concept of service line means. And it's important, because what it really meant was I could activate that Mini for no additional charge and have 2 working Starlinks at no additional cost other than buying the hardware. But yet they were totally unable to articulate. I kept saying, what is a service line? And she said, well, it's associated with your address. And we went round and round, and I never got a good answer. But finally, using AI and research and everything else, I finally figured out what they mean by service line. And it's very important to understand that. So your boat is a service line. Your second dish will be activated on that same service line. And that's important when you do it, to make sure that you activate it under that same service line. Otherwise, you're going to end up paying for it. So that's important to know. Okay, finally, and this might be the biggest one. This is where I wasted so much time. I did something I thought was really smart. I bought from Starlink a 12-volt power supply. Because, as you know, if you're running Starlink and you're plugging it into your 120 house current, that means you're taking DC current off the batteries, running it through your inverter to power the Starlink brick, which then turns it back into DC power in order to power Starlink. So obviously that's inefficient. You're losing a lot in the transition every single time. So in order to save energy, it was a Starlink product, I want to emphasize, not an aftermarket product. A Starlink product was the 12-volt power supply. So that was $100, and then I paid an electrician $500 to run a new line and a new circuit, so I would have plenty of amperage to supply that thing, because it can run up to 55 or 60 volts, and I forget the amps, but it pulls a lot of juice. So $600 I'm in, and 20 hours I spent troubleshooting all of this stuff to finally figure out that the whole problem with the multiple reboots and the inability to connect to Wi-Fi and the inability to link to the satellites all came down to inconsistent power from that Starlink brick. So I converted back to the standard AC power supply that it came with. Haven't had a problem since. So it seems like a good idea to everybody to power the Starlink with your 12-volt, supply. Maybe if you got a 24-volt system, maybe it would work better, but my experience is don't even try, because I intentionally didn't use any third-party aftermarket products. I specifically chose a Starlink product for this reason, and it still failed. And now come to find out, as I've done the research, it's a known problem. You can find it talked about in the forums that it doesn't work well, and you kind of got to stick with the AC power supply. In spite of that, Starlink happily took my $100, and the electrician happily took the $500. That is pretty high on the annoyance meter there. But just suck it up, use the AC power supply, and don't even try with the 12 volt. So that's everything. Hopefully that's helpful. And that's everything I could think of to share with you about Starlink, and I hope that saves you some of the frustration I had and keeps you safe while you're at sea, so you got redundant communications on there. And Starlink is a miracle product, absolute miracle. I don't mean to throw any shade in their direction. There's just some things that don't work as well as they should, and you need to know about them in order to deal with it. So, fair winds and following seas. Thanks.